cost in terms of maintenance and charging is nowhere near the ICEs, that is the internal combustion engine cars. And this is one thing that is driving people to want to own electric vehicles. So if from the time we launched to now we have crossed the 18,000 mark, then I think that the future looks very bright for electric vehicles. It is now the responsibility of policymakers to ensure that we put plans and strategies in place to make the product accessible and affordable. One thing that we need to be mindful of is that the whole world is shifting from ICE to electric. In fact, if you take the EU countries as a case in point, by 2030, there's going to be a major shift. And as I sit here, my daily headache has been that when Europe does away with the ICE, where will they go to? That is the question I have always been struggling to find answers to. We need to quickly position Ghana so that it does not become a dumping ground for the ICEs. After 2030, I bet you that even with 500 euros, you should be able to buy a vehicle in Europe because the technology would have become obsolete and they would want to clean their environment of those obsolete technologies. And surely, if we do not act and act fast, all these obsolete technology that I'm talking about, the ICE, will find their way into Africa and for that matter, Ghana. And when they come, the environmental implications will be more than what we can imagine. So yes, the impact has been good so far, but there is a lot to be done, to also move at a pace that will secure us from becoming a rubbish dump for the obsolete ICEs that will be thrown away from Europe.
But Mr. Ejaku, before you even drop the microphone, so you mentioned the fact that there's a lot to be done within policy, and also call on policy makers to grant more incentives, including waivers, to make it much cheaper for people to uptake EVs. In the budget that was read in 2024, there was actually some waivers. We had a waiver on import duties on the import of electric vehicles for public transportation for 8 years, and also a waiver of import duties on semi-knockdown and completely knockdown electric vehicles imported by registered EV assembly companies in Ghana for 8 years. For the layman out there, we thought these were very ambitious incentives that had been given by government. Are you saying it's not enough? It didn't have the impact we sought to have in the industry?
Yes, thank you. That is why I say that half loaf of bread is better than none. Looking at Ghana as a whole in terms of vehicular importation, the private cars outnumber the commercial cars. So I believe that if you want to make an impact, we should also give attention to the private cars. I quoted some figures for you that if besides commercial vehicles, if private cars had been included in the policy in the budget statement, a beautiful, good-looking EV would cost somewhere in the region of $32,000. And that is where the uptick is going to come from, and not the commercial. Of course, there's a good reason why you do that for commercial vehicles, because that is what we need most. If you look at private cars, in terms of usage, You drive it to one point and you park it for about 6, 8 hours before you drive it to another point. But the commercial cars, the rate of usage is very high, which means that the rate of pollution and maintenance is also high. And maybe that is why the policy was directed at commercial cars. But that is good, all the same. Yet, I think that the private cars must also be given attention because that is where the numbers are. So the two need to be balanced. Seriously, the two need to be balanced. So yes, we have done something good, yet let's like Oliver Twist. Until we cross the line, I think we can do more. You see, if you compare Ghana with a country like Norway, the strategy they used to increase the uptake was that initially they gave EVs dedicated lanes. So people who were driving electric vehicles did not go through traffic. And when the numbers were growing, then they changed it. In fact, fiscal incentives, that's where they started from. And then dedicated lines, free parking, and all that. So if I say that a lot remains to be done, that is what I mean. And we don't have the luxury of time. I gave you a timeline of 2030. Then we are in 2024, just 6 years. And I tell you, 6 years will come just like tomorrow. So if we do not speed up, before one could say, Jack, we are in 2030, and my fears are likely to come through. That is when we'll become a garbage dump for the ICEs. If I should give you a little bit of history, by 1835, people have started toying with electric vehicles. By 1900, about 25% of all the taxis in New York were electric vehicles. But around that same time, Benz discovered or invented the electric the engine, the internal combustion engine, coupled with the fact that oil had also been discovered and it was bought next to nothing. It was so cheap. That forced people to shift their preference from electric vehicles to ICE. And that is what killed ICE about 200 years ago, only to be that is what killed EVs about 200 years ago, only to be resurrected recently. So what I'm saying is that if we do not put our acts together and the ICEs from Europe are dumped on us, it is going for the EVs, and that will not be good for us. And as a policy advisor, that is the angle from which I'm looking at the whole thing, and that is why I made that statement. Thanks.
That's very well appreciated. I think we all do appreciate the fact that anytime you mention 2030, it looks like Ghana may just be a dumping site for these CE vehicles if we don't act now. You made a valid point that indeed more has to be done both at the policy level and also at the incentive level. I would want to speak to the CEO of Solar Taxi before I come to you, Prof, and get your views on some of the things we are discussing. But I want to speak to Mr. George Kojoapia. With this whole, with the incentive that was actually announced during the 2024 budget, the second part of it says that waiver of import duties on semi-knockdown and completely knockdown electric vehicles imported by registered EV assembly companies in Ghana for 8 years. In my mind, that was a typical solar taxi company that we are talking about here. Is this something that impacted your operations? Is this something that makes your vehicles much cheaper? How has this incentive announced by the government affected how the EVs you produce have been uptaken by consumers?
Thank you. So, with that perspective, I think the intention of the government is to communicate some terms of in terms of the position of the country both for long term and some level of medium term too, to put it that way on. I think what we don't want to end up being is a net consumer of just importing vehicles as they have been for the past, but also looking at how do we drive substantial value from the value chain of having electric vehicles. So I think that is the intention. That was the intention that they seek to achieve in that context. For us as a local Sunday company, I think it's kind of communicate the right message of support, both for the medium term and in the long term, and so we're able to kind of signal to investors in terms of what the climate, the investment climate is in Ghana and what the government is looking for. Right. So for us, we have to sell our story of what we like to do and what could be the benefits if that go into that sense on. Yes, it didn't include necessarily importing vehicles now, but I think it gives the general sense of what the government will seek to achieve. So even though part of it will have been good to have that part of the immediate import now, I think the little sacrifice to looking at the medium term and long term too was something that we appreciate. Of course, also the batteries, people always ask for more. I think for overall, I kind of agree that we don't want to be an import-based country necessarily. We want to also to signal that drive the investment. We're competing with other African countries, from Nigeria to Rwanda to Kenya, recently, and Namibia, Ethiopia to be example of that. So everybody's trying to attract investment into their space with now some of policies and among other things. And so to put it in context, if an investor wants to invest right now, where would the investment go into? In terms of investing in a space where they can produce a vehicle and supply across the continent, or invest in just an import-driven company or country. I think it would be rather more of the later, because with the assembling, the person knows that I can make more money from that, among other things. We don't want to create jobs also outside there. So I believe for that kind of deep pocket investment, that position is good for both medium and long term. Maybe the short term, maybe no, as it was rightly mentioned on. It might not accelerate certain things as fast as they want to be on. I think the countries like Norway, they are comfortable to consume, because they don't, the economy is such a way they don't even need, they might not need to produce vehicles in Norway. They have the capital, so it's far cheaper to import these vehicles, buy it in Norway because they have the capital. But at the end, the industry can create jobs, can let a lot of value. And then Ghana is well positioned to export to Nigeria, to export to Ethiopia, export to Kenya, if the opportunity presents itself. So yes, that is our kind of position. We know that the medium term and long term will be beneficial for us. We're currently able to communicate that kind of perspective or positioning by the country to investors, which is attractive for most of them. They find it attractive both for medium term and long term investment. And that is something that we are working for. So immediately, not so much. I have to be honest. But at least it set the page for us to communicate to investors. Invest in Ghana, you can get your money back home, and you can have more returns, as Ghana is going to produce and export to all other countries. There's the AFTA agreement, so you don't need to import from China anymore. You can reassemble in Ghana and move out and do the AFTA agreement. It's going to be far cheaper than even importing from China. Indeed, that kind of language, I think that's what an investor wants to hear.
Well, thank you so much. I'm still reminding us that this is the IPPG's discussion, and we're having a webinar, and the theme for our discussion this afternoon is Driving the Future, Accelerating Electric Vehicle Adoption in Ghana. I believe that those of us who were waiting to see the videos of our various panelists, you realize it's on now, and so you can get to see our various panelists as they speak. You're also allowed to join in via the comment section with any questions, any queries, anything we'd want our expert panel to handle. So once you type it there, we'll have some time later to address all the concerns. I'm speaking to the Director of Renewable Energy Efficiency and Climate Change at the Energy Commission. We also have here the CEO of Grace Mobility Ghana. We also have, as part of our panel, the CEO and co-founder of Solar Taxi Ghana in the person of Mr. George Kojo Appiah. Then we also have Professor Kwame Usu-Kwarteng, who is a lecturer, a senior lecturer at the KNUST, whom I'll be turning to now. Now, Prof, there's a lot that's been said. Clearly, Ghana seems to have all the very beautiful policies that should be put together in trying to drive the uptake of EVs. Also, we heard of incentives which were announced in the 2024 budget. Before this discussion, I thought they were the best, incentives that any government could have given. But obviously, from our panelists, we realized that some more needs to be done if we want to have the impact that we desire. Are we getting it right? Are we on the right track from an academic point of view? What do you think we should be doing, or how are we faring so far from what we have and looking at the issues that industry players have outlined to us?
Thank you. To begin with, we would like to commend the industry players for also taking the mantle to help us to get the EVs into our system. Most importantly, Solar Taxi. They are doing well, and then also Mr. Subitu, his company is doing well. And then our Honorable Energy Commission member is also helping a lot to get these things done. Yes, I agree with what Mr. Edu Ejako said, that the government needs to do more, but I think that they've done a lot too. Because if you look at it, the government has even launched an e-mobility initiative that it has broken it into stages. Based on number of things that needs to be done at certain points in time. I think they are starting from 2025, 2027 to about 2035, trying to look at that year as the preparation or trying to get things done at the normal state to give awareness to people, for people to be aware of the fact that there is the need for us to change from ICE to EVs. And which for me, as Mr. Darko said, the awareness is really been created, right? To some extent, one of the speakers even mentioned that the research or their initial baseline study from the south to the north suggests that people are ready and they want to still buy into the EVs. And that should tell you that most of the human aspects of adoption has been taken care of. But what probably needs to be done now is probably the policy issues as we are talking of. And one critical policy issue is what I think Mr. Subi also mentioned. Some have been solved, but maybe it has not got into our part of the world yet. For the people who travel long distances, if they should buy this vehicle, how long can they travel with the battery before it runs off? And then how long would it take for them to be able to charge? Right now, we have systems that are able to charge faster, sometimes 30 minutes, and then you are on the go. But if it becomes longer, then it means that period of charging time adds up to the travel time. And that can also deter people from probably going in for such systems. But if these systems are put in place, then I can assure you that what the government has done is very much positive. Again, you realize that between 2027 and then 2035, the government looks at the actual take-off, where the government wants to make things known to the public. That is trying to create awareness and others. Is supposed to start from 2024 to 2026. Between 2027 and 2035, the government expects to roll out the whole issue of electric vehicles full-time. And then beyond that year, they expect that between 2036 and 2045, they will ban or probably stop the importation of all ICE vehicles, that is both petrol and then diesel. And that should tell you that we are not off course like that, only that it will take some time. The only problem or challenge that we sometimes make is that, from my point of view, is that we easily compare our development to that of the Western societies. And let's understand that they have different systems, and we also have different systems. In fact, we have a study that we try to compare adoption of these vehicles in Ghana and then that of Germany. And you could see that some cultural factors come into play. So Germany, they have a culture of probably thinking more about the environment, but in our part of the world, we need to draw people's attention to what the environment, what our activities are doing to the environment. So all that I'm trying to say is that we should try as much as possible to decouple our development process from that of the Western societies. The moment we try to use their development as a benchmark for us, we might be tempted to believe that we are not going anywhere. But from my point of view and from the academic side, what the government is doing is very much on the right track. In fact, we also have a research center, the Hammond Research Center, that is also into renewable energy. And we have the Transport Research Center. All their indications point to the fact that the potentials are great. But just as Mr. Darko said, right, there is still room for improvement. But then when it comes to most of the social issues like social norms, social influence, to some extent, as you said now, if you see me using a vehicle, it is highly possible that it will influence you to go and purchase a similar vehicle. And that's why I'm saying that when it comes to these social aspects, it looks like it's not so much of a problem. I wouldn't say it's 100%, but it's quite about 70 to 80%. And that means the 20% probably may be the technical issues, the battery life, charging system, charging points, travel time, and then the others. Again, from our point of view, with what the government decided to go for, so far as the public buses is concerned, to some extent makes some sense. Why? Because most of the private vehicles usually carries one person. So in the traffic, you can see about 20 vehicles lined up. But in the 20 vehicles, you might not even find about 40 vehicles in these 20 vehicles. But then you can find one bus that will carry about 20 people. So to some extent, maybe, I'm just thinking for the government, maybe the government wants to encourage people to drop their vehicles and then join the public buses. And that to some extent will also give credence or give some form of revenue to the government as well. And then reduce the issue of pollution, especially during travel times, especially those of us who commute only between, let's say, Kumasi, Accra, and then let's say Legon or Adenta and Accra, that short distances. So that to some extent, if you join the buses, then we will succeed in probably parking a lot of cars. And that could also reduce it. But that is not to say that what Dr. Mr. Edward said, that the government should look at reducing the taxes on individual vehicles to allow individuals to purchase is a bad idea. But then maybe the justification for the government's initiative is to ensure that the masses will benefit. And mind you, if you look at, let's say, between Kumasi and then Accra, all right, we have so many different buses. We have OA buses, we have VIP, we have STC, we have 2M, we have VVIP. Okay, fine, just about 5. But for all these 5 buses, you realize that between Kumasi and Accra, each of them may have about 20 cars in and out per day. So you're talking about 400 cars traveling between Kumasi and then Accra per day with these 5 institutions. And if we could support them with this, then to some extent, their compaction can also help to reduce the issue of pollution through vehicle emission. So I think the government is really doing well, only that there's still room for improvement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this endorsement, Prof. I'll be coming to Mr. Subiya Card very shortly. You promised us a tour of the various vehicles in your garage. Otherwise, maybe once we are done, I'll book a date and then come over for some test drive of all the beautiful luxury vehicles you have. But before you do, I realize that Mr. Edward Jaco's hand was raised. I don't know if you have something to share before.
Yes, moderator. The last speaker, Prof, made mention of policies. So I wanted to quickly share what is being done in the arena of policy. I think you will agree with me that in every successful and thriving market, there is always regulations. You need regulations to ensure that you have very level playing market, and that is one thing that also attracts private investment. So we have developed in the first place standards. Let me also say that Energy Commission, our core mandate here is with the charging infrastructure and not the product itself, which is EV. That is within the purview of the Ministry of Transport and their agency, DVLA. Ours had to do with the charging infrastructure. So we have developed standards for the charging infrastructure. And we have gone ahead also to do regulations. The regulations will give us the legal muscles to be able to enforce the standards. I liked it when Prof. Quatin said that, I think that one of the our audience, he said that there's a difference between policy and its implementation. I totally agree with you. And that is an experience that the Energy Commission has gathered. So as soon as we develop the standards, we have gone ahead also to come up with regulations that will help us to be able to enforce the standard. You are perfectly right. A lot of policies are not being implemented because the policies lack the legal muscles to help the enforcement agency to do the enforcement. So by maybe the first quarter of 2025, you see the regulations in place that is going to help enforce the standards for the charging stations. And in fact, when this thing comes into play, then Prof, your fears driving from Accra to Kumasi, where do you charge? At what rate do you charge? All these things are found in the standards. You understand? And we have the mandate to enforce the details of the standards. So we make sure that where you place the charging facility, which level of charging we have level 1, level 2, we have fast charger. Now, even the technology is reducing the time for charging. It is reducing. Now, within less than 30 minutes, you can have a full charge and then continue with your journey. So these are other things that we are doing behind the scenes to encourage private investors to come into the system to invest and to help us to increase uptake. I totally agree with all the statements that have been made in support of local assembly and commercial policies to support commercial EVs. I agree, but I was very cautious when making my point. You see, this is a nascent market. In as much as we are looking at the product side, don't forget about the charging facility side. Investors are also ready to invest in that. Without the critical mass of the vehicles, it will not make putting or investing in charging facilities attractive. And if you have more cars without the charging facilities, you're going to have a kind of disjointed approach. So we need to be careful so that we are able to move the two in tandem, so that development moves at a single pace. And also, somebody in the comment section said that, made a statement about in support of commercial vehicles as against private. You see, the nature of our development. Yes, sir.
Not to cut you, but I think there are some questions there that we'll be coming to. So if you don't mind,
Okay. Okay, then that is fine. So when we have time, then we'll answer those questions.
Yes, Fred,
sorry.
some small contribution. So, Mr. Du, I wasn't saying anything different from what you were saying. I was rather commending you, even for
I understood your point. I understood your point clearly.
Initiative from your end. That is very, very positive.
Yeah, I understood your point clearly.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you too. So, I mean, but Mr. Ejaku, you made the point that the mandate of the Energy Commission is basically to deal with the charging infrastructure. We'll be coming to talk about it a bit later, looking at the fact that this charging infrastructure rely on the national grid to be able to charge these vehicles. What the long-term impact could be for us, because we've had a certain history when it comes to electricity issues here in Ghana. So we want to know the projections we've made and the assurances we have moving forward. But before you do that, I'll come to you, Mr. Subi Akkad. You mentioned you are obviously a big boy or a big player in the EV industry here in Ghana. You mentioned that you deal with several other brands and you import them. Is there any partnership you have? Because you don't just deal with the vehicles and you also deal with the charging infrastructure. Is there any partnership between you and other local firms or institutions or assembling plants as a way of transferring knowledge, as a way of transferring technology to these other local firms?
I will answer your question, but before I say that, before I do that, I would like to comment as well a little bit on some of what have been said by Mr. Kofi Adwajaku and Mr. Fateng. I tend to agree a lot with Mr. Kofi. Tomorrow is not too far. You're talking 2030. We're talking today. We're talking present and the past. We are already late. And just to support of what Mr. Kofi is saying, the problem what we are facing now, we will end up having problems getting cars. And we will be becoming a dumping, as we are now, unfortunately, for cars that are not suitable for the environment and for our health. I mean, this is one of the things that we have to look at. Then when we're looking at other things, let's not look at Europe. Let's not look at Asia or anywhere else where they have implemented the benefits from any cars, duties, taxes for the electric cars. Let's look at Mauritius, Madagascar, Réunion, Ethiopia. Ethiopia now, it's full, it's going electric, and many other countries in Africa. It is becoming very, very important to look at it. When we come to the assembly, I think this is something that you would like to discuss later on. Assembling cars here, as per the auto industry, is not so easy when it comes to electric cars. It has many, many requirements, which we can talk about later on. Definitely, we can go from A to Z in terms of manufacturing, creating jobs and everything. But there are other steps that we have to look at with immediate need, and these are our lives, our health, our pockets. We're talking as well, I mean, as Mr. Kwateng has said, we're talking about opportunities for public transportation and everything. Do you know how many taxi drivers you have in Accra, in Ghana? Forget about Accra only. I mean, is a taxi driver or all the affiliated car industry like Uber, Bingo, Tango, all the others, yeah, they are public transportation as well. So we have to look at that critically and immediately, not to say, oh, the public transportation is only the big buses or anything. We're talking about opportunities for everybody for creation jobs and specifically making it more affordable. Now you're talking as well about, your question, to go back to your question about, is it assembly that you're talking about?
The collaboration between you and local.
Yeah. We are in discussions with firms. You'll be surprised, some of them are petro firms who are in the market and who are big players and who want to introduce electric charging systems in their stations. We actually have one at this stage with Total next to at the ex Golden Tulip Lancaster Hotel, next to Lancaster Hotel. We have a charger there. We have another charger at Palace on Spintex. And we have, and I attended personally about 3 weeks ago a charging conference here. And what we are planning to do is to introduce in collaboration. Definitely, we'll always refer back to Energy Commission to take their guidance and everybody else to take their guidance about how we can implement quickly the charging. We have imported some chargers. We are importing some chargers. We have to go gradually. This is an infrastructure that has to be done by very big firms, by the governments, but we are trying to do something to infiltrate and to make it more assured, to give more assurance for the government, for the customer. We have as well other companies who are interested to come in and establish charging stations all over Ghana. So again, going back, why are we insisting on the duty and VAT? Because if we have investors, we're talking about investors, somebody who wants to come and invest in establishing charging systems in Ghana, you will look at how many cars we have in the system. What are the facilities that are given? Are there possibilities to do it? Is it feasible? So that's something that we have to look at. And we can't wait for tomorrow or 2030. We have to act now, because if we don't act now, they will go somewhere else, where facilities are being given, benefits are being given to other countries. People are not waiting for us around the world to spend their money. They will spend it somewhere else if we don't make it feasible and viable for them to do it. I mean, we have so many things to talk about, taking that into consideration, that can affect the pockets of the government and the pocket of every individual immediately. Pollution, health, fuel, maintenance. These are things that can make an immediate impact on us, and which cannot make us wait till 2030. These are the players. I mean, definitely other players will be talking as well to manufacturers. We are already talking to manufacturers about assembly, but assemble cars here does not come that easy. There are so many preparations. Assembling a nice car, the engine combustion car, is much easier to prepare than an electric car. Electric car, you should have a good, safe place to store the batteries. We are talking about high voltage. So when we are talking about high voltage, it's extremely important to be careful on how to handle those cars. So assembling them is not that easy. To go into assembling those cars, you have to invest much, much, much higher. And to invest much more into assembly of those cars, that means you have to have a very big volume to make it feasible. Wow. That's why at this stage, the most important thing for us is to have the direct support from the government to waive or reduce the taxes. If they cannot waive it immediately, at least reduce it, not increase it. Some cars, the combustion car is 10%. The electric car is 20% duty. Why? I mean, something like that should not happen. We were talking about prices of vehicles. You were talking about $30,000 something about prices of vehicles. For us, this is our luxurious level of pricing. We have gone to negotiate with the manufacturer to have the excluding VAT cars starting from $15,000 up to $22,000, $26,000. These are going up. So the cars can be very affordable. Mind you, you're saving on maintenance 70% cheaper than maintaining the normal car. You're saving on fuel about minimum 50%. And then you can use solar as well, so that in case there is...
I believe the advantages of using an EV over an ICE car cannot be overemphasized. We all really are aware. And probably when the factors are right, we'll be able to have many more people take it up. Time is really not on our side. But what I would want to do now is to run through the various questions that our audience have shared with us. And then in your concluding remarks, if there's any one of them that you want to respond to, you may just pick them. So I'll just run through. This one is from Nana Kusia Smith. And she says that, does the panelist see a commitment to policy implementation from the government? Having policies is one thing, and the issue of implementation is the problem in Ghana and in Africa as a whole. I'll go to the next one, no name. It says, Mr. Moderator, can you ask the manufacturers if they have made profits so far? How do they perceive competition from used cars, since this is the preferred option for the average Ghanaian? Another anonymous attendee says, hi, I want to find out if there's any plan or strategy for ICE vehicles when the EV penetration in Ghana is high. And then this other one I'll go through says that I want to find out, Ghana is currently facing challenges with meeting the demand of residential and industrial need for power, adding the transportation sector to it, which will undoubtedly increase the electricity power demand. The big question is, are we prepared to meet the surge in demand, and are we taking steps to increase supply? I believe this one, Mr. Ejaku will take it up later in his concluding remarks. Another question from Armand Figues, I think, says that what is the current situation with EV charging infrastructure development? Are there any incentives? I believe Mr. Subiak had alluded to that earlier, but then he may also add some more remarks when he has 1 minute to conclude. Then the last one from Charles Denu says that, are we also considering rural areas since our rural electrification is very slow? So I've read through the questions, but I'd also want to pose questions to you as my concluding question. So you may just try to juggle them. We have just about a minute for each of us to round up. Mr. Ejaku, I think for you, the question is trite. We are obviously seeking to have an increased uptake in electric vehicles. Clearly, currently, we claim or we have excess capacity in the country. Over time, we know that once these vehicles come on board, they are going to feed from the national grid. Have we done that projection? Are we sure that we're not going to push for an uptake to eventually get back to the situation we were some years back, where now people have the vehicles and cannot charge them even though they have taken it up? And then for my manufacturers, that's solar taxi and waste mobility. You can just look at what the future holds for us as a country. Clearly, there are some policies, there are some attempts by government to incentivize the various players in this industry. We are asking, what do you make of the project? What do you project the EV industry Ghana to be, say, in the next 5, in the next 10? We keep talking about 2030, which is just about 6 years away. What is the outlook from where you sit? How does it look? And from the lecturer, Prof, I believe that once they are done, you would just assemble offers. For you, you see light at the end of the tunnel. But the thing is, we need to position ourselves as Ghana as a leader in the EV, either manufacturing, assembling, or even usage value chain. Are we on the right track? You said you are making some good strides, but 2030 is just some few years away. Are we really on the right track, and can we be hopeful that by 2030 we won't be suffering from the gloomy picture that Mr. Kofi Edu-Ejaku painted earlier, that if you don't take action, we may be a dumping ground? So I'll start with you, Mr. Kofi Ejaku, as you...
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, for the sake of time, I want to answer your question very simple and straightforward. There is no fear for the uptake of EVs in Ghana now and then the days ahead of us. We rather have excess capacity. So if for anything at all, the EVs are going to come in to mop up the excess capacities for us, because we pay for them, whether we use the power or we don't use the power, we still pay for them. So it is good and important that the EVs come and mop up over 2,000 megawatts that is lying idle, so that at least the economy will find some respite. So there's no fears. In terms of power, we are ever ready, but we need to distinguish between fuel availability and capacity. If you have a vehicle and you can't buy fuel, you don't have means of transport. So sometimes when we plunge ourselves into darkness, people think that, hey, then there's shortage. It is not shortage. Sometimes it is maintenance. Sometimes it is fuel issues. So you need to drill deep to unearth what the actual problem is. But as I said, when it comes to electric vehicle, I think it is one good thing that has happened to us. For now, the 2,000 megawatts that is lying idle, we will find a very sustainable use for it. Thank you very much. For the others, I think I've done my best to answer a lot of them in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think Mr. George Kojo would take up the next for us. And these are your concluding remarks, George Kojo Appiah. We are asking you what's the projection you see from now to say the next 5 to 10 years? How do you perceive the EV market in Ghana being? And what are the prospects you have?
The market has grown. As I said earlier on, we have moved to when most people used to ask us, what is this? Now it is now in a mainstream conversation. So I think we have achieved quite substantial growth in that direction. I think what is remaining here will be on in terms of large scale adaptation. I think that we are not likely to follow some of the projected trajectories that we currently envision for the future. I think there's a couple of new surprises in terms of the technology that we are yet to witness. Changes in the battery technology totally will changing how we project to charge the vehicles. I don't think that EV charging stations are going to be like filling stations that we need for fuel vehicles. I don't really think so. But whatever be the case, I think preparing for today to meet today's demand and then preparing ourselves for tomorrow opportunities. I think that is how we need to position the future of what the EVs could be like. But it's kind of an interesting way that we Africans get to get access to mobility solutions in a more affordable and clean way in the next years ahead of us. So I think that is something that is always good to be excited about as an African in terms of how e-mobility will play out.
Good, and thank you so much. I'll throw the same question to Mr. Subi Akkad. Obviously, EVs are here to stay. It's not going anywhere. We either get on the train or we are left behind. How do you see the next few years going?
While I'm talking, I'll be taking you on a tour.
Okay.
In our showroom.
Can we do that in 1 or 2 minutes?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Well, these are your the motorcycles we have, tricycles. Sorry, I have to look properly. It's not very well clear. And then we have all the cars that are available here, from vans to cars like these. You have these cars, you have these cars here, you have the pickup, and then you have the electric cars here, the luxurious car over here as well. So I don't know if you can see well, but in principle, these are the variety of cars, and we have 2-3 more models on the way. Now, when we are talking about the issue of the future we have to look at it in various ways. Number one is I mentioned something in my contribution to your to the webinar, and that is maintenance is 70% less. So when we are talking about maintenance 70% less, we'll be talking mostly like the car maintenance will depend mostly on tires, on suspension, and on braking system. And then when you look at from other advantages that we have, and that can be an investment that every single person can do in the market. There's no more oil change. There's no more pollution. What can be replaced with? It can be replaced with the business of charging. So people can start getting involved in the charging business rather than to have only the issue of only maintaining the car. This is the future. This is the future of the electric cars business. So that's the total cost of ownership. The total cost of ownership is going to change a lot. We're talking again about the cost of charging, the cost of, as I said, maintenance. The time that your car is in the workshop is less than the time than the combustion car is. So these kind of things are very important to look at. We have the range, again, which we have to give. This range anxiety has to stop. The range, we are looking at cars. I mean, the technology is changing drastically. The technology is changing because the batteries are getting better. That means longer range. The charging system is getting faster. So all this anxiety that we have is moving not every year, every 2-3 months. So again, I'm going back. The 2030 is too long. When others around the world are talking about 2030, they're talking about being full operational. Here we are talking about we should be ready now, and this is the time that we should move. Please let us be careful. Pollution. When Europe is talking about pollution, and when Europe is talking about getting into the electric vehicles, there is something which is extremely important, and that thing is, the word is fear. So if we are polluting here, it's going to affect them as well. So we really have to think of that as well. But our direct health is the most important thing. One of the biggest cause of lung cancer is related to emission. And that has been proven. And that's why we have been moving very fast with that. So the future is not the future. The future is now. And that's something that we really have to be careful of. Again, as we are talking about, we're talking about issues like, how do you call it? Health, fuel. What is the biggest impact on governments in government's pockets? Is the fuel bill. I mean, with that, you are taking a big burden off that can be used for other things. And then we have to look like it was said before, how do you call it? The consumption of electricity that we have that now is available. We have so much possibilities to. We have access to it. We have excess of electric supply, and then we have the solar. The solar is it is very easy at this stage now, because most of the vehicles that we are having here can be charged with a solar panel. It can be charged by normal electricity. It can be charged with a DC charger, with an AC charger. So the option is really limitless. So again, as I'm saying, you're talking about future. I'm talking about present. And the present now. People are complaining about the cost of transportation from everybody in the staff. I am complaining, everybody's complaining. But at the end, we're finding solutions for that. Let's grab these solutions.
You couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much, Mr. Subiakad. Maybe I'll just go off script and mention that if for any reason you're looking for a brand ambassador for any of those beautiful cars, I'm pretty good at driving.
You're more than welcome to come in.
Okay, I'll just give the last word to Prof. And Prof, a lot has been said. Indeed, a certain gloomy picture has been painted for what could happen to us in 2030 if we fail to act. We know we have the policies, but obviously there's also a very big difference between policy and implementation. What's the outlook? Are we supposed to sleep comfortably and wait that things will be fine, or there are things to worry about? From where you sit, what's the outlook for us as a country? And let's drive towards our PVs.
Thank you so much once again. I don't think we have to sleep, and we are not sleeping. If you look at, I'm happy Mr. Subi gave some statistics. In fact, the records suggest that the highest pollutant vehicles are the lightweight vehicles. That is the small trucks and then passenger cars. All right. And then to some extent, the passenger cars, as he was saying, we are not saying that the taxi drivers are not important. No, not at all. Please, everybody is important in the country. But as a government, every policy must start somewhere. All right. And usually the policy should start with the masses, not individual. To some extent, the capital towns of Ghana, our population might not even be up to 40% of the total population. And then out of the 40%, a few of us are using vehicles. And majority of even people in the capital towns are still using the public transport and public buses. And they commute between two places and others. And we have trucks that helps us to also convey our products. In fact, basically, our whole logistics system is borders on transportation. And that is why I was trying to commend the government for even thinking about the e-buses to start with. Yes, as time goes on, we will definitely come to the individual buses. And to your question again, we are not sleeping because, as I said, the government has already initiated a policy. That is the electric vehicles policy by the government. And they have divided it into three main phases. That is between 2024, 2026, there is something that needs to be done, basically to create awareness. After 2026, that is 2027 to 2035, they are trying to look at an uptick with a target of about 35% of the population. And then beyond 2036 to 2045, then they will try as much as possible to ban even the importation of ICE vehicles, right? So let's understand that we appreciate that we might be late compared to what they are doing in Western societies, but we are not that far. Again, we can't also say that we can move at the same pace as they are probably doing. Let us try and understand what we have and base it with data as we're talking of, and then try to support the government to achieve what we are looking for. But if we say that we have to change everything overnight, that might be difficult for our government. Remember, the taxes that the government is taking also support the development of the country. So if all these things should go, the management of the country can also be a challenge. But then I think in their own way, they might find ways to balance the equation where there will be a win-win situation, both for the government and also for the citizens. Right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much, Prof, and thank you so much to all my panel members. I'll just run through the panel members we had of. Today, we've been hearing from various experts. There's a webinar organized by the IPPG. Then we heard from the Director of Renewable Energy, Energy Efficiency and Climate Change at the Ghana Energy Commission. That's Mr. Kofi Edu Ejakun. We also heard from Mr. Subi Akkad. He is the CEO of Grace Mobility Ghana. We also had joining us Mr. George Kwejuapia. He's the CEO and co-founder of Solar Taxi Ghana. Also with us, and who just spoke, is Professor Kwame Usu-Kwarteng, a senior lecturer at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. Before we leave, we have a research fellow with IPPG, Mr. Seth Osumante, who will be joining us with closing remarks before we sign out. So, Mr. Mante, if you can hear me. Please take it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fred. And I would like to start off by extending our sincere appreciation to everyone, and to you, Mr. Moderator, Fred, and our speakers. Thank you very much for joining us and for the insights shared with us today. And to our participants, it's been great having you. The comments and the questions were very insightful. So that's great. And from our discussions, for me, I think it is clear that a collective effort is required from all of us, from governments, from the private sector, from regulators, from investors, and of course, those of us in the civil society. And we need to have a joint effort to make the EV transition a reality. But from our end as a policy think tank, I think we will continue to focus on providing recommendations that will aid policy implementation in this field. And I'm pleased to announce that the insights shared today will be compiled into a policy brief and circulated to the government and all relevant stakeholders for policy consideration. And once again, thank you all for your time and for your contributions. Do have a good evening, good afternoon, or enjoy the rest of the day, depending on where you are. And we have to keep the conversation going. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you also. Wish you all the best.
And to our audience, we say thank you also so much for being there and for the questions you sent in. And to Mr. Subiaka, thanks for agreeing to make me the brand ambassador for the...
This deal has to happen.
Okay,
please visit our showrooms to see the real technology and how it can be. You're welcome at industrial area, North Industrial area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kwateng, please, we are waiting for you.
Okay.
Mr. Subi, I would like to visit your office. We visited Solar Taxi, and as part of our case study for classroom teaching, we would like to be at your end. I will find a way to contact you later on and then see what we can do together.
Please. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And you are also welcome to our university. Anytime that you want to come, please, you are welcome.
We sure will. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
And also to our facilitator, Emanuela Baini. Thanks so much for the wonderful work.
Emanuela, thank you so much for...
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for honoring my invitation.
Thank you, Emanuela. Bye.